Hello everybody, welcome back to Papel Podcast. Today we are going to continue our From Art to Model project with part 3 of Eastern Valley. In the last episode we completed the modeling stage, and today we are going to continue by starting the texturing phase. Now the texturing phase is actually quite a bit longer than I thought it would take, so we're going to extend this from 3 parts to 5 parts. Now in this part we will be doing part 1 of the texturing phase. In the next episode we'll be completing texturing, and in the very final episode, part 5, we'll be constructing the scene in Unity and kind of showcasing it as a final product all together. So without further ado, let's go from art to model. Okay, so here we are again. Now we are in the texturing phase, which is probably one of the longest phases depending on what your project is. But for me personally, I really love the texturing phase because I get to really go into detail, bringing these models to life, giving them, these small details that I want to convey in the model, but you can't necessarily convey with polygons. You have to do it with textures. So this phase is really fun for me. And what we're starting off here, as you can see, we're beginning with the tile texture for the roof. So the way I've constructed this, as I said in the last episodes, the roof actually is made up of sort of modular pieces, which means I can only texture this one tile and it will replicate that same texture across every single tile on the roof. So it's really handy. It means I only have to, texture this one tile instead of like 700 plus tiles. So it's definitely a good thing. But as you can see, I'm just kind of putting a bit of detail into things, giving it some shine. And I definitely wanted to put some sort of kind of like dirt and make it look really roughed up, because in the concept art and just kind of in Eastern Valley's general art direction, it seems like a very traditional, kind of older looking style. So I wanted to convey that type of like, this was made by hand, this has like imperfections and all these different things. Here you can actually see I wrote out Pangyas in Japanese and in English below it. I was just kind of experimenting. I did want some sort of symbol on the bottom of that tile, but I didn't end up going through with it. But the tile is complete, and we are moving on to texturing the clock, which is one of my favorite bits of this texturing process so far. The clock is just, I don't know, it's something really close to me and close to Pangyas, because Pangyas, if you've noticed, it has a tendency to put clocks and watches and kind of cogs and timestamps all over their art, and it's kind of embedded in their art direction. So creating something like this and texturing something like this was really cool. As you can see, I'm just beginning with like the outer layer, and I actually took a look of the logo that's on Eastern Valley. There's actually a clock in it, and I kind of looked at that and saw what elements they used there and tried to replicate stuff like that, but tried to kind of go my own direction as well, because the clock that we see in the concept art you can't really see super clearly, so I had a bit of freedom. But you can actually see I tried to do a Papel face because I did want it to feel, obviously like Pangyas, but I didn't go through with the Papel face, but I did end up creating this sort of sign that's prevalent in a few different art in Pangyas, and specifically in Eastern Valley. So there's the clock handles, and I did this kind of like zigzag pattern around the edge between the dots. It kind of reminded me of Pippin's watch, and just sort of Pippin's general design. The type of style looks very similar there. And the theme that I was going for here, a bit different than the concept art, was actually black and gold. So gold is sort of like more like a hard surface, like a reflective thing that felt very old-timey. very like, you know, it went well with these cogs, as you can see here, so I tried to go for that, and the black just had a lot of nice contrast, so I used that as well. But the clock on the concept art is blue. It has a blue rim, and the centerpiece is actually white, so I did make it a little bit different. But it's pretty close, and I think it takes the necessary artistic liberations as it needs. As you can see there, I made the middle cog a sort of bluey, sort of silver color instead of just the gold to give it a bit of variation. And here I'm doing the centerpieces sort of texture for the backing of the clock. So I made this sort of like almost like an orangey goldy color. I tried to go for something more similar to what we see in the artwork for the logo of Eastern Valley. There's a clock on there, so. But this is where I started to do the blue, and I used a bit of it kind of looks like a worn down, almost metallic. It's a little bit shiny, but it has a lot of roughness to it. It looks aged, and I think I tried to get that type of style where it looked like this is something that's used a lot, and it's probably been there for like maybe even 100 years or so. So I think that fit well. And gold was the central theme of this, so I made the central handles very gold, like that. So I'm just polishing up the details, and the clock is done. So all I had to do is put some procedural masks on it, just some scratches, some dirt, and give it that final layer of polish that I wanted. But yeah, I'm super happy with how the clock came out. I think it's gonna look great in the full model, and I can't wait for you guys to see it all put together. It looks amazing. But that's the clock. It looks really good. And the last piece that we textured today is the fairway / ground, and this was actually super interesting for me because I looked at the extracted textures of Pangyas for the fairway that they use on Eastern Valley, and I kind of dissected it in my head, and I saw, okay, what did they use to make this? And obviously all of the textures, or at least the vast majority of the textures, I assume are hand painted, like with some sort of application like Photoshop. But because I'm using Substance Painter, I decided to try to create this fairway procedurally. So I used a lot of procedurals, procedural masks, different effects, doing height maps, and kind of toying with colors, layering. You can see in the tab to the right, you can see how many layers this took up. But I basically created the base with all the little individual grass pieces that kind of have like the highlights of, it's kind of like a lighter green or more towards a yellowy green. And then on top of that, I would create, behind that, I would create a layer with these darker bluey green lines. And then I just use a mask and go over it to create the lines in the fairway, as we can see in game. And I found the borders a bit too straight, and they're not quite like that in the game's textures, so I used a sort of roughing mask for the brush and kind of gave it a more rough edge, and then I even used some height to push up the individual layers of the edge of the fairway to make it look a bit more 3D and have a bit more depth and some nice, things that we haven't really seen in Pangyas there. So that looked really good. As you can see, I'm just doing the edge, and I made sure I got rid of these because it was poking out too much into the edge corners, which we didn't want that. And then after I clear that up, I just basically choose which color we want the edge to be, and I kind of went for a sort of a limey green, more tilting towards yellow, but I tried to keep it not too distant from the main one. And then the final process was to create the ground for the building. So this is going to cover the inside of the building area leading out to the bridge. So what I imagined here was kind of like Wiz City's ground, where it's these tiles that are kind of layered, repeated over and over and over. I tried to put some dirt and some different details to make it look a bit more rough, a bit more varied. And yeah, that's kind of how it ended up coming out. I'm really happy with it, and I am super excited to start working on texturing the buildings, which will be in the next episode, which is the final texturing phase. And then in the episode after that, the last episode of Eastern Valleys from Art to Bottle, we'll be putting it all together in Unity as a scene, giving it background, giving it some effects, maybe even some like wind effects and stuff like that, and then creating a kind of little tour of it in a final presentation video. So I'm really excited for that. I really love how these textures are coming out so far. I think they're really detailed and really cool, and kind of keep in the style of Pangyas. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, comment below what you think of it, and please look forward to the next 2 parts, the final 2 parts of this project. I'm so excited, and I can't wait for you guys to see the final product. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you on the greens. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more content. And don't forget to support us on Patreon below. A big shout out to Sub Baby, which is this month's Patreon supporter. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the greens.